Is this the kind of weather you look forward to in January? Be honest. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, the heat wave breaks, but the drought goes on, and yeah, your lawn looks really crappy. A Republican state senator concedes his defeat in last month's recall election, and the Democrats are now in the majority in the Senate, at least for now. Mitt Romney speaks to the NAACP convention and gets, well, a mixed reaction.
And I submit to you this: if you want a president who will make things better in the African American community, you are looking at him. You take a look.
Well, it was a bad week for local taxpayers. In Waukesha County, the tab for County Clerk Kathy Nicholas's election mistakes ran to more than $250,000. The so-called Obama scam came to Wisconsin, with scammers telling folks the president was going to pay their utility bills. No, he's not. A new report blasts Penn State for its handling of the Jerry Sandusky molestation charges. And the baseball season enters its second half, which we all hope is a lot better than the first one. But we start with the race for U.S. Senate. The Republican primary, believe it or not, is just a little more than 4 weeks away. And two new polls show that a political newcomer may be on the rise. The Marquette University Law School poll, which got the Walker recall exactly right, by the way, says that former Governor Tommy Thompson is leading the race. But businessman Eric Hovde is gaining. According to the Marquette poll, Thompson is the choice of 35% of likely Republican voters, Hovde 23%, former Congressman Mark Newman 10%, and Assembly Speaker Jeff Fitzgerald at 6%. But 1 out of 4 voters said they were undecided. A second poll by the Public Policy Polling Outfit, which is a Democratic group, had a somewhat different picture. That poll had Hovde actually leading with 31% of the vote to Thompson's 29%. The PPP poll had Newman at 15%, Fitzgerald at 9%, with 16% undecided. The winner of the August 14th primary will face Democrat Tammy Baldwin in November. Joining me on our panel this morning, political strategist, former Milwaukee County Supervisor Linda Bruin, the MacIver Institute's Brian Fraley, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, and Media Tracker's Brian Sikma. Okay, Brian Fraley, what is the state of the race? Who's in the lead? Is Tommy Thompson in the lead or is Hovde?
Tommy Thompson has a double-digit lead.
Yeah.
The PPP poll is an outlier. The lead will shrink as Newman and Hovde and the outside groups start spending a lot of money attacking Tommy. But right now, he is comfortably in the lead.
Okay, well, comfortably in the lead, but on Friday, the Club for Growth, which is pro-Mark Newman, launched a TV ad attacking Tommy Thompson, which everybody pretty much expected, but it also goes after Hovde. Explain the dynamic there.
Well, I was a friend and advisor of Bob Welch in 2004 when he ran against Darrow and Michaels. He targeted all his fire on Russ Darrow, and who ended up winning the primary was Michaels. And so Newman and his people don't want to do that, knock Tommy down and see Hovde, who's spending a lot of money on his own, so they're shooting at both.
Okay. What's your view?
Well, I think that clearly Thompson is in the lead. I think that going after Hovde, if I was Newman or his folks, I would be doing that as well. But I don't see Newman or Fitzgerald catching up to either two of them. And if that 25% of undecided voters see it as a two-person race, then Thompson could really be in trouble. Because if they all go to Hovde, Thompson could lose.
Okay, do you agree, Brian Sigma?
It's a three-man race at this point between Tommy Thompson, who's consistently led because he's got the name identification, Eric Hovde, the newcomer who's spending a lot of money right now getting his name out there, Mark Newman. I think right now the Marquette poll, if you look at it, the sample size of just Republican primary voters was pretty small. I'm not saying it's not accurate, but I'm saying at this point in the game, we've not seen a really solid poll. The PPP poll came out. Again, we've not seen a solid poll in this race. I think it's a three-man race. And I do think Mark Newman has some catching up to do, but if other groups start spending a lot of money in this race, then I think you're going to see Tommy Thompson's numbers go down.
Yeah, and I think Mark Newman's just really starting to put his ads out there right now, so you're going to see some dramatic change. You know, Marquette is more respectable in terms of polling. The PPP, you know, there might be some ulterior motives involved in trying to throw these figures out. Tommy Thompson is up by double digits right now, and I'll be surprised if he gets knocked off.
Okay, but these things are fluid, and they are snapshots. And what makes these very difficult to poll, these primary elections, is unlike the general election where people are locked in place and there are not many voters in place, you have a lot of undecided voters. Clearly, Eric Hovde has momentum, and you're starting to see this because, interestingly enough, both Tammy Baldwin and Mark Newman are running anti-Hovde and anti-Tommy Thompson ads. The question I have for Tommy is, You know, I mean, Tommy Thompson is frankly going to have to overcome what's going to be a negative barrage of ads, you know, coming from outside groups and the other candidates. Is he going to be able to do that? For example, they're going to be talking about his record as governor, the taxes that were raised, the spending that was raised, the debt. They're going to be talking about the period in which he appeared to be in favor of health care mandates. You know that there's going to be those ads on television.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both. I mean, you look at, he did cut taxes 91 times, largest property tax cut in state history. So he'd be happy to run solely on his record too, if it's the full picture of the record. The question comes down to is, what will Tommy Thompson's message be in the final month? Will he talk about a vision for the future based on his success in the past, or will he be totally on defense?
And will people go out to vote for him? This is an August primary, and there's a big factor there. I think that people that have already picked Hovde or Newman or Fitzgerald, they'll go because they're motivated. I don't know whether all of the Thompson people are just picking him right now because they remember his name, and whether they're as motivated as the more conservative folks in the party who will definitely show.
Okay, I mean, I think there's three storylines this week. Now, I mean, number one, Tommy Thompson is probably still in the lead. Number two, the momentum is with Hovde. And number three, this race has gone negative. The fact that the Club for Growth, began running those anti-Thompson, anti-Hovde ads sparked quite a war of words. On Friday, here's the statement from the Thompson campaign. Mark Newman should be ashamed of himself. He ran an ugly and deceitful campaign against Scott Walker, and now his attack dogs are grossly distorting Tommy Thompson's record. And it goes on trying to link Mark Newman. Is there a risk this is going to backfire on Mark Newman? Or does he have any alternative?
Mark Newman at this point has some baggage left over from 2010. Everybody in the Republican Party knows that. I think the attacks that we're seeing right now on Tommy Thompson are valid. Now, he can complain that they don't cover the entire record, as Brian mentioned a moment ago, but Tommy Thompson's a politician from a different era, and his record is not the same on the key issues that are the big topics in Washington right now. But I do think Mark Newman doesn't have an alternative, and he's going to have to find another way to overcome that negative perception that's out there.
The only person who benefits from a circular firing squad is Tammy Baldwin, and I think that is going to be a crucial component in people's decision making when they come to vote. Who can beat Tammy Baldwin? Is Tommy the only one? Are there more than one? I said 2 years ago when I wanted Governor Thompson to run against Feingold that I thought he was the best to win, but I didn't think he was the only one that could beat
Well,
Feingold.
the other person that wins, we haven't talked much about him, is Speaker Jeff Fitzgerald.
He's not
well, okay, you may say that, but when you have all of this negative campaigning going around, you know what? We know what you don't see. No one is attacking Jeff Fitzgerald
Because there's no Fitzgerald campaign right now.
Well, it's a small campaign, but at least for now, I mean, if you're Jeff Fitzgerald and the way you're drawing up the campaign is that everybody nukes everybody else out, and everybody goes, hey, but we all like Jeff Fitzgerald, and we haven't heard anything negative about him. Still ahead on Sunday Insight, a proposal for a new high-rise building on Milwaukee's lakefront. And as we go to break, Jay Leno on the most recent presidential campaign finance reports.
In June, President Obama's re-election campaign raised $71 million. And Mitt Romney's campaign raised $107 million. Isn't it amazing how much these candidates have to collect from special interests to get across their message that they can't be bought? Amazing.
It may be the single most valuable piece of real estate in Wisconsin, a choice piece of lakefront land in downtown Milwaukee. Now, for years, this site has been used as a transit center. Last week, County Executive Chris Abele gave his blessing to a proposal by developer Rick Barrett, who hopes to build a 44-story apartment and hotel high-rise there. The $120 million development would be called the Couture. But county supervisors balked at fast-tracking the deal, saying they had not been adequately briefed about alternative proposals. And in particular, they objected to the administration's decision to withhold details of the other proposals that Abele had rejected behind closed doors. Okay, now, Linda Bruin, your name came up during this conversation because the economic development director for Chris Abele said that you had told him that he didn't need to share all of these details with the other elected representatives.
Oh, I think this is a classic case of a reporter either condensing everything down into a soundbite or Brian DeFora. The bottom line is the county executive in doing proposals has two options. He can do a formal RFP process where proposals come in, they're tracked, they're evaluated on federal standards, and it comes forward with the top pick, which is what Brian DeFora and I talked about. You have to send the top pick to the board. all the information on the other proposals are shared in closed session. There's also another process called requests for information.
Wow, you're making this really boring.
Yeah, I am, but the bottom line is, this is what happens. Sometimes there's more detail. The bottom line is the administration had a right to bring forward a proposal in a couple different ways. They did follow that process. But the chairman of the Economic Development Committee, who, by the way, is Pat Jerzyk and is a good chairman, said, wait a minute, I think we need more public review of this. It's a big deal, this high-rise. It'll change the skyline forever. So, in my opinion, both sides are right, and the dust will settle, and they'll pick the best one.
I guess I have 3 questions, because there ought to be some public input into this. This is very valuable real estate. This is a generational decision, and it certainly looks like you had a sweetheart deal that was concocted behind closed doors without much transparency. I don't know what the alternatives were. I don't know what other ideas were out there. We don't know where the financing is going to come from. We don't know what the taxpayer thing is going to be. And yet Chris Abele apparently has this idea that he is going to, give this offer to this very well-connected developer, and what we're all supposed to line up behind it, Brian?
I mean, it was, surprise, surprise, dysfunction in the county board and Chris Abele being aloof. Who would ever imagine we'd be talking about a situation like this? It can't be a rookie mistake. He's been county executive for over a year. The transparency isn't there. It is a valuable piece of property. I also agree with Lynn a little bit. I think the reporting on it was kind of sloppy, but it did catch people off guard when you see on the front page of the paper that a 44-story building is going to be built downtown. You're like, what? Where did this come from?
Well, I mean, I guess part of this is having a discussion, and one of the reasons maybe I'm interested in this, because I remember for 20 or 30 years we've been discussing what is our vision for the lakefront, what is the plan for the lake, what is the highest and best use for this, and we come up with, Chris Abele's come up with this plan for a high-rise for rich folks to be able to have condominiums, which may be a great idea, except at what point does the rest of us unwashed be able to say, hey, there are other cities, Baltimore, Toronto, that have come up with fantastic plans for the lakefront that don't simply involve a high-rise from a developer that in the past has gone to the taxpayers for support, appears to have kind of unusual financing options.
Yeah, because Park East keeps coming to mind, that land, and there were all of these deals, and 1 week there's supposed to be these massive facilities there, and the next week nothing, and it's been vacant all of this time. I think you're absolutely right. I think they need to come up with a long-term plan for the lakefront. It's very valuable land that's been underutilized. I mean, but it should include more than just this high-rise. It should include a plethora of different kind of options.
Well, apparently they had 3 or 4 different development plans proposed. And I'm not sure right now whether they did the full formal proposal, the RFP process.
Do we know who they are?
Yeah, it was in the paper. There were multiple different developers.
Who?
I didn't memorize who they were, but some of them were local. And part of one of the reasons the board might be wanting a delay is to more thoroughly look at some of those. Those developers themselves may be asking the board to more thoroughly look at those.
Well, among one of the reasons Abele gave for picking this was that the other proposals had office buildings, offices in them, as opposed to this was purely residential, and he didn't want to compete with the other office buildings. Well, I think that's an interesting policy decision to go, okay, how did we come to the conclusion that we don't want office buildings, that we want more condos for millionaires? Brian Sigma.
Again, that goes back to, I think, a point that needs to be made right now. Why are we leaving the decision for this in the hands of one individual, Chris Abele? I'm not saying he's not making the right decision, but okay, so why aren't we putting office space down there? Why aren't we putting something that more people can use? You're basically walling this part of the lakefront off. Do we not have the economy in the city of Milwaukee? Do we not have the economy to support more jobs?
The board has to adopt whatever happens, as well as the city of Milwaukee has to sign off with zoning. This is very early in the process, and I think part of the reporting on this, kind of a combination of what was in the paper and then got on the evening news, was the impression that this was signed, sealed, and delivered. And I don't know if it was because of the way they conducted the press conference or what.
Again, there are a lot of legitimate questions, including whether the taxpayer is going to be on the hook for any of this, who's going to pay for this, is this going to be the AFL-CIO doing the financing as somebody else, and also, what is with the couture? This is Milwaukee. Coming up on Sunday Insight, the severe drought, and as we go to break, some campaign trail mix to go along with your Sunday breakfast.
The president announces he's going to make it harder for jobs to be created. I just don't think this president understands how our economy works.
My opponent, his allies in Congress, they sincerely believe that prosperity comes from the top down. They believe that if we spend trillions of dollars more on tax cuts, mostly for the wealthy, that it'll somehow create more jobs.
If there's an outsourcer in chief, it's the President of the United States, not the guy who's running to replace him.
He wants you to show your papers, but he won't show us his. It's kind of fascinating.
Water is in the news. You knew that. The lack of water led last week to the declaration that our area was suffering through a severe drought. The consequences for farmers could be devastating. Lake Michigan water levels have also continued to fall. The water is now 8 inches below its level from last July and a full 20 inches below its average for this time of year. Meanwhile, the city of Milwaukee derailed negotiations to sell water to neighboring Waukesha. Waukesha has been looking for a new source for water because of issues with radon. But getting a new source of water has proved to be controversial. Milwaukee officials insist on attaching strings to the deal and wanted to block Waukesha from sharing any of the water it brought from other areas with other areas. Now, Waukesha says that's a non-starter and impossible under state law. So what is going on here with Milwaukee? I mean, I guess the hard part is, okay, so Milwaukee could make $3 million selling Lake to Waukesha. Why don't they just do it and take the money?
I don't know what Tom Barrett's afraid of. I mean, it's not like Waukesha is going to do anything to the Lake Michigan that he's not already done by pouring 10 billion gallons of waste into the lake. The city, Waukesha has an aquifer that they can rely upon thanks to the EPA coming in saying they can't use it. They're now looking for other options.
Yeah.
You think maybe Milwaukee would say, you know, we're only using about 25%, as the MacGyver Institute found out, of our water supply. Why don't we just be a good player and be a good neighbor and get along with this?
Okay, well, how do you put this in the context of the quote-unquote regional cooperation here?
That it never existed. It
Yeah,
doesn't exist now.
Yeah.
Waukesha has an option. I mean, they can go to Racine or Oak
Right.
Creek.
They're going to get the water.
Right.
Yes.
But those are
Yeah.
pretty costly propositions. But I don't fully understand the hesitancy in the part of the city. Because we definitely need the money.
Yeah.
Maybe we could filter some of those Asian carps
could
to
could you explain it?
Yes.
Yeah.
From housing to economic development to now water, the city of Milwaukee's idea of regional cooperation is do as we say and we'll all get along.
Linda Bruin?
Well, it's hard to follow that one up. The bottom line is Waukesha has not only Oak Creek and Racine, they also have the Great Lakes Compacts vote that they can appeal to, too. So I think in the end, Waukesha is going to
Of course they're going to get the water, but
yeah.
this goes back to this question of the regional cooperation, and it seems like a just gratuitous shot, particularly coming from the city run by Mr. I'm going to end the Civil War, Tom Barrett. Can't we all get along and cooperate? And isn't this kind of a, I don't know, drop-dead Waukesha message from Milwaukee?
It was, we'll consider giving you the water as long as you meet other conditions. It was a classic
Like those
case of a
votes,
municipality
75%
protecting
exactly.
its resources.
Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. And as we go to break, Congressman Paul Ryan's direct answer to Vinnie Vitrano's direct question about possibly being Mitt Romney's running mate.
I'll dispense with my due diligence here, however, and just ask you if there's anything you can update us on Governor Romney's search for vice president and your role in that.
Nope.
Very well. I asked the question, you answered, we'll move on.
Time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. And Linda Bruin, you are first.
Well, my loser of the decade is Penn State. Last week's scathing report blasted officials for repeatedly choosing to protect Penn State's reputation and a child molester and failing to protect its victims. It's ironic, isn't it? They wanted to protect the university's reputation, but Penn State will not always be remembered for their failures. The only good news, and it is for the victims, is that Penn State was in the middle of a $2 billion fundraising campaign when the scandal broke. They've raised $1.6 billion so far. So when the victims take Penn State to court and win millions of dollars in civil damages, the university will have the funds to pay them.
Brian Fraley.
My winners this week are Racine City Clerk Janice Johnson-Martin and her Assistant Clerk Donna Doyster. Winners? That's right. The fact that they've kept their jobs despite gross incompetence displayed in the recent recall election is a sign of their agility and perseverance. Heck of a job, ladies. My losers are the officials at Penn State University who put their concerns over the institution and the reputation of their football program over moral obligations. We're getting a better picture of how they handled the allegations over Jerry Sandusky's reprehensible behavior, and it's downright ugly.
Michael Holt.
Well, it's not exactly a winner per se, but I have to give props to Mitt Romney for showing up at the NAACP convention. He wasn't getting any kind of applause of any significance, but he was brave enough to stand there and take it. Losers, I think the mayor and the chief of police are missing the boat in terms of community police relations. They held a meeting Thursday and everybody left mad. Don't focus on this group called Occupy the Hood. They need to look a little broader. these relations are deteriorating.
Brian Sikma.
Well, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has assembled notebooks of negative information on targeted GOP congressional candidates. Media trackers this week released 12 of the yet unreleased notebooks after an IT glitch allowed Google to pull them from the Democrats' website. For transparency forced by a hiccup, the DCCC's web team is my winner of the week. Well, a loser, if you want to call it that, is Assembly Speaker Jeff Fitzgerald's Senate campaign. They haven't managed to catch fire since its fleeting moment of fame when Fitzgerald managed to get a vote of confidence at the state GOP convention. And unless something big happens, Fitzgerald's campaign is only going to continue losing the Republican Senate primary, and time is not on his side.
Well, my winners, Milwaukee area veterans. Last week, the Hiring Our Heroes event at the War Memorial Center provided much-needed opportunities for returning vets to connect with jobs. And in less than a month, on August 11th, mark this down, this community is going to hold one of the nation's largest and most dramatic veterans event ever, the Field of Honor at Miller Park, a culmination of the Stars and Stripes Honor Flight program, which has flown more than 2,000 World War II veterans to see their memorial in Washington, D.C. It will be a once-in-a-generation event, and you can get your tickets at starsandstripeshonorflight.org. See you there. Thanks for joining us for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.